Sup everybody, this is Hatsune coming to you from where I do my recording. Ha ha ha, I'm so original. Anyway, we are going to be reading another creepypasta. Yeah, I know, so shocking. Oh, it's creepypastas all in the row. Oh! Well, you know what? I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just so bored and I'm not really ready to sing anything right now. I have stuff in the works, just I haven't gotten it down yet or it hasn't been converted yet. So, don't exactly blame me entirely. It's not, I know it's my fault, but still, I'm just not prepared. But, anyway, let's get to the point. Today/night/ whenever the heck you're listening to this, I'm going to read, probably in my opinion, one of the most creepiest creepypastas of all time, at least in my honest opinion. It's really freaky. Ben Drowned. If you don't know what that is, it's a really popular Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask creepypasta. I actually always wanted to play Majora's Mask, and then I read this and I'm like, well, anyway, I'm probably gonna end up recording this in parts because YouTube's got a stupid time limit and whatnot. So let us head and honcho right on in. Okay, insert person's name here. I need your help with this. This is not a copypasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is video game related, specifically Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest shit that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least, that I could finally play all those old games of my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And while beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became completely bored of beating a level 9 CPUs. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, fuck yeah, F-Zero, and 2 other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there and only one table was set up with random junk on it. Something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of the car and was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for a lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you'd asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There's just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't the middle of the afternoon where there are other people within shouting distance, I would not have even thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and immediately I noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed over look about it. I forced myself to look to his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation when he would tell me he had no idea what a video game was, but to my surprise he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me that he'd be back in a jiffy, and turned to head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice that he was selling what he was selling on his table. Littered across the table were rather peculiar things, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one was visiting this guy's garage sale. These weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing. As I came to the last one, for some reason it almost looked like Majora's Mask. The same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outward. Initially, I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find that game in these garage sales, some fraudulent bullshit was projecting itself into ink blots, but given the events that happened afterward, I'm not sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I would have asked the man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up at the old man and was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit I jumped out of a reflex and laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that someone had written Majora on it in black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was and had asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid and it was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention to it then. I was too caught up in not only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge and there was no guarantee it would work. But then the optimist inside me interjected that maybe it was just some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that was all I needed to be back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying, "Goodbye then!" At least, that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt the man had said something else. My fears were confirmed and I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was simply one save file named simply Ben. "Goodbye, Ben," he was saying. "Goodbye, Ben." I'd felt bad for the man, obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson, Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell that it was pretty far in the game. He had almost all the masks and 3 out of 4 of the mains of the bosses. I noticed that he had used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 and by the Stone Tower Temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had to come so close to being in the game but never finished it. I made a new file named Link out of tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady looking game cartridge, I was impressed with how smoothly it ran. Literally just like a retail copy of the game, save for a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. I figured it was just a bug, a fluke in the program and causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while, and it was around after I'd beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably wanted to save files and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the file just out of respect of the game's original lore, not like I needed 2 files anyway, hoping that would solve the problem. It did, and it didn't. Now the NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. My save file was still called Link, though. Frustrated and with homework to do, I put the game down for a day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now, some maybe more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those who don't, you can Google it, but the gist is that as the clock is about to hit 000 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right at the countdown disappears, you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch and try to finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try, and then the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game, the tribute boxed-in arena, staring at the Skull Kid hovering around me. There was no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and the background music, which was regular for the area, was still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the area. No matter what I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Nothing would happen though, and this kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when the text appeared on my screen. I'm not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started to navigate the room again, testing to see if it was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game this was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, after another message appeared on the screen, and again, the first one was already a pre-existing phrase. Go out to the lair of the temple's boss? Yes? No. I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press and how the game would react. But then I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words Dawn of a New Day, with the subtext line beneath it. Where I was ported to filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I'd ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here was having a feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I'm not normally a depressed person, but the way I felt here was feeling that I never knew existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of Clock Town. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day 1, only to find that all the inhabitants were gone. Usually with the 4th day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dogs that run around outside the tower. This time they were all gone. What replaced them with the ominous feeling that there was something out there, in the same area as me, and that it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point I wasn't even considered for my avatar. I felt that I personally was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was a song of healing, ripped straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up so if you could expect something to pop out at you, but nothing ever did. And the constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then, I would hear the faint laugh of the Happy Mask salesman in the background, just quiet enough so I wasn't sure if I was hearing things, and just loud enough to keep me determined to find him. I looked in all 4 zones of Clocktown, only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing. West Clocktown had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken. Hopelessly broken. As the reverse song of healing repeated for what must have been the 50th time, I just remember standing in the middle of South Clocktown, realizing that I'd never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I don't know whether it was the combination out of the play's textures and the atmosphere and the haunting melody of once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and distorted, but I was literally on the verge of tears and I had no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here, and this powerful sense of depression was both foreign and crippling. I tried to leave Clocktown, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black and I would just zone into another part of Clocktown. I tried playing my ocarina. I wanted to escape, and I did not want to be here. But every time I played the Song of Time or Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes echo far, but nothing happens." By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me here. I didn't want to go inside the buildings. I felt that I would be too vulnerable there to whatever I was terrified of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran toward the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head, and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the Happy Max salesman smiling at me. Not Link. Me, with the Skull Kid scream playing in the background. And when the screen returned, I was staring at the Link statue playing the song of Elegy and Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with that haunting facial expression. I turned around and ran out and back into South Clocktown. To my horror, the fucking statue followed me. The only way I could compare with is like Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. Every so often, at random intervals, the animation would play of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me. Or, I don't even want to fucking say it. Haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysterics, but not even once did the thought of turning off the console occur to me. I don't know why, I was so wrapped up in it. The terror felt all so real. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear right behind me every single time. Link started to begin to make weird animations I'd never seen him do before. He would flail his arms around or spasm randomly at the screen and would cut to the Happy Mask man smiling again for a brief moment before I was face to face with that fucking statue again. I ended up running into the Swordmaster's dojo and ran into the back. I don't know why, but my panic just wanted me some kind of assurance that I'm not alone here. To my dismay, I found no one. But as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but no avail. Confused, and backed into a corner, I just stared at the statue, waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed again to the Happy Mask salesman, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring at me. Whatever was left of the fourth wall completely shattered while I ran out of the dojo, terrified. Suddenly, the game warped me to an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again, as I was given a brief moment to rest before the statue started appearing behind me again. This time aggressively. I could only take a few steps before it would summon behind me again. I hurriedly made my way out to the tunnel and appeared in southern Clock Town. As I ran aimlessly, in sheer panic, suddenly a redid screamed and scream faded to black as dawn of a new day and line appeared again. The screen faded in, and I was standing on top of the clock tower with Skull Kid hovering over me again, silent. I looked up and the moon was black. Back, looming just meters above my head. But the Skull Kid just stared at me hauntingly with that fucking mask. A new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse. In some sort of desperate attempt, I equipped my bow and fired off a shot at the Skull Kid, and it actually hit him, and he played an animation of him reeling back. I fired again on my third arrow. A text box appeared saying, "That won't do you any good." And I was picked up off the ground, levitated upwards on my back, and then Link screamed as he burst into flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any moves. As the death screen played, my lifeless body still burning, the Skull Kid laughed and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground, and by some unknown force, he immediately burst into flames again, killing him. This time, during the death scene, the faint sounds of a reverse song of healing could be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed that there was no music playing this time. That all there was an eerie silence. I remembered that in the original encounter with the Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or to summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body, once again, horrifically exploded into flames, and he died. As his death screen neared its end, it began to chug, as if the cartridge were trying to process aloud something. When the scream came to, it was the same scene as the first 3 times, except this time Link was lying on the ground dead in a position I'd never seen in the game before, his head tilted towards the camera, with the Skull Kid floating above him. I couldn't move, I couldn't press any buttons, and all I could do was just stare at Link's dead body. After around 30 seconds of this, the game simply fades out with a message. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? I'm gonna cut here, gonna leave a little cliffhanger. You're probably like, no, don't do this to me, Marley, you're so mean. I'm sorry, I'm gonna do it too, because I just was reawakened as to how haunting this game is. It's like a killer, except not quite literally. It's panic inflicting for me. That's gonna be part 1. I will hopefully get to recording part 2 very soon. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it. Please comment to see what I can do better. Subscribe to me if you'd like. Or you can check out my gaming channel where I do a lot of stuff with video games. Mario Hatsune Plays is the name. So yeah, it's very cool. And I am out of here.